The disappearance of Jayme Closs shocked the nation. After a late-night 911 call and the tragic discovery of her parents in their home, investigators were left with a chilling mystery. Where was Jayme? For months, authorities searched tirelessly, following every possible lead. What they eventually found was more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. In this documentary, we dive deep into the Jayme Closs case, from the quiet small-town setting to the horrific events of that night and the massive manhunt that spanned the country. We learn how detectives gathered vital evidence and how justice was finally served in court. This is not just a crime story, it's a story of survival, resilience, and a relentless search for the truth. Stay tuned as we uncover the twists and turns and shocking details that made this one of the most unforgettable cases in modern crime history. Dear viewers, in the next video releases you will find very intriguing and confusing cases. And in order not to miss them, be sure to subscribe to the channel and please like the video. In the small town of Barron, Wisconsin, life flowed slowly and unhurriedly, as if in the rhythm set by country roads, forests, and endless fields. Here, among the cozy streets and houses, the Closs family was well known. James and Denise, a couple with a solid reputation as decent and hard-working people, were those who did not strive for loud fame, but preferred a simple, quiet, but honest life. Their only daughter, Jayme, became the center of the universe for them, the main pride and the source of daily joy. To understand the atmosphere of their home, you need to imagine a typical American family from a small town, where everything is based on mutual assistance, closeness, and respect for each other. James Closs, whom everyone called simply Jim, was born and raised in the same area. He was distinguished by a calm nature and innate goodwill. Jim's adult life was spent working. He spent many years at the local Jennie-O turkey store, which was the largest employer in the area. Working in the turkey factory required discipline, precision, and endurance, and James possessed all of these qualities. His colleagues noted him as a reliable, quiet, but friendly person who did not like empty talk, but was always ready to help if someone found himself in a difficult situation. Outside of work, Jim appreciated simple joys, home repairs, yard care, occasional trips to nature. He was a person who believed that family and home are the main treasures in life. Denise Closs had a different character, more open, smiling, sociable. She had that soft energy that can warm not only loved ones, but also acquaintances. She also worked at the same Jennie-O factory, and she was known as a conscientious employee, ready to take an extra shift or help a colleague sort out work issues. Unlike James, Denise loved to keep up conversations and found a common language with almost anyone. In the family, she often acted as a link. She was the one who organized holidays, meetings with relatives, made sure that their daughter Jayme had everything she needed for a happy childhood and harmonious growing up. Despite the fact that the spouses did not live in wealth, but in the modest conditions of a small town, they knew how to appreciate what they had. The Closs family home was not luxurious, but it was always tidy and cozy. It was a place where you wanted to return. The smell of home-cooked food, framed photographs, neatly laid out things, soft light, which Denise liked to place in the form of small lamps and candles in the evenings. Their home was not just a roof over their heads, but a space that reflected the character of the owners. Honest, modest, and loving people. The couple paid special attention to raising their daughter. Jayme was born in 2005, and from that moment on, James and Denise's lives changed dramatically. They were not the kind of parents who put their careers above all else. On the contrary, all their decisions, where to work, how to plan a budget, what to spend time on, were made through the prism of caring for their daughter. Jayme grew up in an atmosphere of kindness and security. Her parents tried to protect her from unnecessary pressure, but at the same time instilled discipline and responsibility. Denise paid more attention to the emotional side of upbringing, conversations in the evenings, joint trips to the store, participation in school events. James was the one who taught his daughter practical things. He helped with math homework, showed how to fix small things around the house, explained the meaning of the word reliability. The girl grew up active, cheerful, and at the same time modest. At school, she was not the loudest or most noticeable student, but she was valued for her kind nature and willingness to help. Teachers noted that Jayme was a responsible and diligent girl who loved to study and respected others. Friends called her a quiet but loyal friend. She loved dancing, took part in school clubs, and often participated in events for children and teenagers in the local community. For James and Denise, it was important not only to provide for Jayme financially, but also to surround her with love and attention. They spent evenings together, watching movies, playing board games, or walking around the area. In the warm season, the family went to the lakes, which was a traditional pastime for many residents of Wisconsin. They could often be seen in the company of neighbors. The Closs family did not strive to live in isolation. On the contrary, they valued human connections and tried to maintain good relationships with others. Colleagues and neighbors described the family as ordinary, but here this word sounded like a compliment. In a world with so much instability, the Closs family seemed to embody simple, reliable values: work, home, love for a child, the desire to work honestly and not to harm anyone. They were far from loud conflicts, did not participate in disputes, did not strive to stand out. That is why they were respected in the community. An important part of Denise's life was her relationship with her relatives. She maintained close ties with her family, often called her sister, discussed small news, shared plans. For her, family ties meant a lot. The Closses always celebrated holidays noisily, with visits from loved ones, gifts for Jayme, and home-cooked meals. James was more reserved in this regard, but always supported his wife's initiatives and helped in organizing family gatherings. Together, they created harmony that extended throughout their lives, and especially to raising their daughter. Over the years, Jayme became more and more independent, and her parents watched her grow up with pride. They saw a future in her, wanted to give her an education, help her find her place in life. And although the family's financial resources were limited, their love and support became the very capital that is much more valuable than material ones. The Closs family was a typical example of how life is built in small American towns. Work, home, the belief that everything most important happens within the family. For neighbors and colleagues, they were a familiar, habitual element of everyday life, but it was precisely in this simplicity that their value lay. James and Denise's adult life revolved around work and care, and Jayme's life revolved around study and hobbies. It was that very quiet, almost imperceptible harmony that is sometimes lacking in a noisy and chaotic world. And that is why everyone who knew the Closs family could say they were good people, people who lived for each other, for their child, for a simple, peaceful future. Their biography is a story of perseverance, honesty, and love that do not require loud words, but are reflected in every day spent together. The evening of October 14th, 2018, in Barron, Wisconsin, was no different from hundreds of others. For a small town, mid-autumn is a time when life becomes more measured. Work shifts end earlier, the streets empty faster, people prefer to spend evenings at home with family. Sunday was approaching midnight, and the vast majority of residents were already asleep. The streets were drowning in darkness, lit only by rare street lamps. The houses looked quiet, hidden from the outside world. There was that special silence in the air when any sound is heard especially clearly. The Closs family led the same measured lifestyle as their neighbors. That evening, James and Denise returned from work. The Jenny O plant where they worked set the rhythm of their daily life. Long hours at the factory, then the journey home, dinner and the usual household chores. Jayme, their only daughter, spent the evening in her room, getting ready for school. The atmosphere in the house was familiar. Warm light, calm conversations, getting ready for bed. It seemed that nothing foreshadowed trouble. By midnight, the family went to bed. The area where they lived was considered quiet and safe. The neighbors were people who had known each other for years. The surroundings, forests, fields, rare lights in the distance, did not create a sense of danger. But it was in such moments of peace that a force entered their lives that completely changed the fate of the family. Around 12:53 a.m., an emergency call to 911 came from the Closs house. Denise was on the line. The recording of this call was preserved in the official materials. The operator heard broken words, noise, and signs of panic. According to the report, the woman did not have time to provide details. Her speech was interrupted. Her voice sounded frightened. Loud sounds were recorded in the background. The call lasted only about 45 seconds and ended abruptly. The operator tried to call back, but there was no answer. According to protocol, the nearest patrol car was immediately dispatched to the scene. The atmosphere in the control room changed dramatically. It was clear to the operators the situation was urgent. In their practice, there were often false calls or random calls, but the tone and character of the sounds on the line clearly indicated a serious threat. The address of the Closs family was recorded in the database, and the duty officer gave the coordinates to the nearest patrol. The police left immediately. Instructions were heard on the radio. Possible intrusion. Caution is required. At night, the journey took about 10 minutes. Cars sped along deserted highways, headlights snatching fields and forest belts from the darkness. The officers understood that human lives depended on the speed of their reaction. By 1 o'clock in the morning, the patrol arrived at the family's house. The first thing that caught their eye was silence. The house stood dark, with a closed door. Not a single movement, not a single sign of life. One of the officers noted a light in the distance, as if a car was leaving the area. But this observation was not recorded as a priority. The main thing was to check the house itself. The police got out of their cars and cautiously approached the front door. They tried to ring the bell, knock, and loudly call out to the residents. There was no answer. Then the officers began to walk the perimeter, checking the windows and the back of the house. Everything looked closed and silent. In such cases, protocol required immediate action. The decision was made quickly: go inside. When the door opened, the officers immediately realized that the situation was critical. In the hallway, they came across the body of a man. It was Jayme Closs. His position indicated that he was at the door at the time of the attack. He was probably the first to meet the intruder. According to official reports, the man died instantly. The officers recorded this and continued moving inside. The scene they saw in the house indicated a forced entry. Objects had been moved, some doors were damaged. The police moved carefully through the rooms, with their weapons at the ready. The atmosphere was tense. The silence and darkness made each step especially difficult. They checked the rooms one by one, recording traces of tampering. The closed bathroom door attracted special attention. Attempts to open it in the usual way were unsuccessful. Then the officers decided to break the lock. Denise Closs was behind the door. It was clear from the situation that she had tried to hide with her daughter. But by the time the police arrived, the woman was already dead. For the officers, this was the second confirmation that a targeted attack had taken place inside the house. After finding Denise's body, the police began checking the rest of the rooms. The main task was to find Jaime. Everything in her room looked as if she had been there shortly before the incident. Personal belongings, school supplies, a bed with a blanket. But the girl herself was not there. The officers noted her absence in the report, which immediately gave the case special significance. The house was cordoned off. The police began to document everything they saw: the location of the bodies, the damage, the marks in the rooms. Every corner was checked several times. The officers recorded even the smallest details: open drawers, the position of shoes, marks on the floor. In such cases, any circumstance could be important. By this time, additional forces had arrived at the scene. The patrol officers who arrived first passed the information on to their colleagues. The house was now an officially registered crime scene. Access to it was limited. Only those who were supposed to complete the initial examination remained inside. The entries in the reports indicated the bodies of 2 adults, Jayme and Jayme Closs, were discovered around 1 a.m. Both were in different parts of the house, both dead. The third member of the family, 13-year-old Jaime, was missing. No signs were found at the scene indicating her whereabouts. Thus, what began as an ordinary night for the family ended in tragedy. For the police officers who were first on the scene, it was clear that this was a serious crime. 2 bodies in the house and a missing young woman. A combination that in law enforcement practice means the beginning of a large-scale operation. But at that moment, all that could be recorded with certainty boiled down to dry facts. The call to 911, the lack of response to repeated attempts to contact, the arrival of the patrol, the discovery of the bodies of Jayme and Jayme. And only the following hours would shed light on what exactly happened inside the house in that short period between the call to 911 and the arrival of the police. The first hours after the discovery of the Closs family's bodies turned into a continuous stream of emergency actions for the Barron police. As soon as the officers were sure that the threat on the spot was eliminated, strict protocol began, securing the perimeter, recording all evidence, calling in forensics and the investigative team. The house instantly turned into the center of the investigation. Every step of the officers was recorded. In such cases, access to the site is strictly limited to avoid losing traces. By midnight, the street near the Closs house was completely blocked off, and the rare passers-by, attracted by flashing lights and noise, kept their distance. Forensic experts arrived at about 2 in the morning. Their work began where the patrolmen stopped. It was necessary to establish the exact time and manner of death. Jayme Closs, whose body was found in the hallway, died from a gunshot wound, according to the examination. Forensic doctors noted that the shot was fired at point-blank range. This indicated a sudden attack and the inability to resist. For investigators, this confirmed their hypothesis. The killer had acted purposefully, removing the obstacle at the entrance to the house. Denise's body was found in the bathroom. She died in a similar way, from a gunshot wound. Forensic experts determined that the woman had managed to try to hide, possibly with her daughter, but the door could not protect her. The nature of the wounds and traces at the scene indicated that the criminal had used force and determination. Forensic experts concluded that the murder occurred almost simultaneously with the call to 911. This explained the abrupt call. The woman simply did not have time to provide details. Both deaths were classified as murder with a firearm. Shell casings, traces of gunpowder and characteristic damage to the door frames were found in the house. Ballistic examination later confirmed that the weapon was a shotgun. This gave a certain direction to the investigation, but was not disclosed to the general public. In the first hours of work, the main task was different: to find Jaime. The absence of the young girl at the crime scene was perceived as an alarm signal. The kidnapping scenario was considered from the very beginning. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was involved almost immediately. Already on the morning of October 15th, the so-called Amber Alert was distributed throughout Wisconsin and neighboring states, a nationwide message about a missing person. Its text included the name of Jayme Closs, her age, description of her appearance, and a photograph. Local TV channels, radio, and internet resources immediately broadcast a call for help. The search of the area began immediately. The police brought in volunteers. Hundreds of local residents came out to comb the forests, fields, and roads. Helicopters with thermal imagers examined the surrounding area. Sinologists with dogs looked for traces. But the first day showed that the kidnapper acted carefully. Neither in the adjacent territory nor on the surrounding roads were there any clear traces of Jaime's movement. The dogs lost their scent soon after leaving the house. This indicated that Jaime was taken away by car. Investigators knew that the more time passed, the less likely they were to find her alive. The press was busy covering the events, with headlines featuring words like shock, horror, and impossible. Reporters occupied Barron, turning the quiet town into the center of national attention. For the police, this meant a double burden. On the one hand, conducting the investigation, on the other, giving balanced comments without revealing key details. The work with the evidence inside the house lasted for several days. Experts recorded every little detail: shoe prints on the floor, damage to the doors, gunpowder residue, fingerprints. But the analysis showed that the criminal had prepared. The traces were minimal. The prints found on some surfaces did not match the databases. There were no surveillance cameras in the area. This was common in rural areas. This became a serious obstacle for the investigation. However, one direction yielded results. The reports included a detail. Some neighbors heard the sound of gunshots and barking dogs, but did not attach any importance to what was happening, mistaking the noise for hunting in the forest. Only after news of the murder did they report it to the police. But even this information did not allow them to determine the criminal's route. During the investigation, various versions were considered: an attack with the purpose of robbery, a personal conflict, a random selection of victims. But the main question remained: where is Jaime? The investigators focused on this. FBI agents and criminal profilers were brought in to investigate. Their findings were alarming. The criminal had likely chosen his target in advance and carefully planned the attack. The lack of evidence of robbery, targeted actions, the murder of his parents, and the disappearance of Jaime all pointed to kidnapping as the main goal. This scenario was considered extremely dangerous. The kidnapper acted in cold blood and decisively. At the same time, the investigation began working with the family's circle. Relatives, colleagues, and neighbors were questioned several times. The police looked for any leads, strange calls, suspicious acquaintances, conflicts. But the first weeks of the investigation yielded few specifics. The key point was the data on Denise's phone. An analysis of the 911 call showed that the call was made from a mobile phone, and the system recorded the exact time. Experts carefully checked the device, but other than the fact of an emergency call, they found no new traces. But a hypothesis emerged. The criminal acted so quickly that the woman only managed to dial the number and press call. This indicated the seconds between the break-in and the fatal shot. As the search continued, the public actively participated in disseminating information. Flyers with Jaime's photo were posted in store windows, schools, and bus stops. Volunteers created groups on social networks. Each new media report drew attention to the case, but also increased the pressure on the police. Despite the lack of obvious evidence, investigators gradually pieced together a picture. They understood that the criminal did not leave random traces, but did not act perfectly. Any deviation could be a mistake, and soon such a mistake became apparent. On one of the sections of the highway, near Barron, a patrol found traces of a car parked. Based on the freshness of the tire prints, experts assumed that the car was there on the night of the crime. The tire prints were recorded and compared with the databases. The result yielded several matches, but one of them attracted attention. The tracks corresponded to a car registered to a resident of the neighboring county, 20-year-old Jake Patterson. Further investigation revealed that the man had no previous criminal record, led a secluded lifestyle, and held irregular jobs. The investigators' attention was heightened when it became clear that he had quit his job at a meat processing plant shortly after the murder of the Closs family. Moreover, the company's employees confirmed that he had shown an increased interest in Jaime, although he did not know her personally. This information formed a version that they began to develop in more detail. The police set up surveillance of Patterson's house. He lived alone, rarely went outside, and had almost no contacts. For several weeks, investigators collected information, movements, purchases, behavior. Gradually, the circle of doubts narrowed. The turning point came in January 2019. After 88 days of searching, an event occurred that was shocking even for experienced officers. In one of the small villages, a girl approached a woman walking her dog. She introduced herself as Jayme Closs and said that she had managed to escape from the kidnapper. The woman immediately called the police. The information was checked immediately: the girl's description, her words, the match in appearance. The confirmation was complete. It was indeed Jaime. She indicated the house where she was held. Officers immediately left for there. Suspect Jake Patterson was arrested the same day. He did not resist. In his house, the police found evidence confirming the version of abduction: traces of Jaime's presence, personal belongings, means of restraint. The facts turned out to be irrefutable. Thus, the investigation, which began with an alarming call and a crime scene, ended with the arrest of a man who had planned the abduction and murder in advance. For investigators, this moment became the point where the chaos of the first weeks finally acquired logic. The victims had a specific criminal, and Jaime had a chance to return to life. After Jake Patterson's arrest, the Closs family case finally moved from the investigation stage to the trial stage. In the first days after the arrest, the Barron County Prosecutor's Office announced the filing of charges. The indictment included several counts: 2 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping of a minor, false imprisonment, and use of a firearm to commit a felony. Each of these charges carried a prison sentence of decades. Immediately after his arrest, Patterson was transferred to a high-security county jail. Local authorities understood that the case had attracted enormous public attention, and the slightest violation of procedure could undermine confidence in the investigation. Therefore, all actions with the suspect were carried out strictly according to the law, under the supervision of lawyers and judges. Patterson was brought to the courtroom in an orange prison uniform, in handcuffs. His behavior amazed observers. He looked calm, almost indifferent. He did not respond to the judge's questions, the presence of reporters, or the looks of the victim's relatives. This was even more disturbing than any display of aggression. When the preliminary hearing began, the public and the press filled the courtroom. Society demanded an answer. How could a young man with no criminal record commit such a daring crime? During the reading of the materials, it became known that Patterson confessed to the crime almost immediately after his arrest. He described in detail how he prepared for the crime, choosing the moment, watching the family, planning the kidnapping. According to Jake Patterson's testimony, his motive was extremely disturbing and at the same time unusual for such crimes. He told the investigators directly he had no personal connection with Jaime and her family. He did not know them before. They had no conflicts or intersections. It all began when he accidentally saw the girl getting on a bus near his home. It was then, he said, that he became obsessed with the idea that he had to take her. Patterson did not speak of any clear, practical motive, such as ransom or revenge. His goal was to completely control her life, isolate her from the outside world, and keep her close. In his confessions, he noted that he had prepared carefully. He changed the license plates on the car, took gloves and a mask so as not to leave traces. In essence, this was a kidnapping for the sake of the very fact of possessing a person. He wanted Jaime to become a part of his life, but in reality, it meant forced deprivation of freedom and total control. It was this lack of cause and absurdity of motive that became the most frightening aspect of the story. The crime was committed not for profit, but for the sake of an obsession that arose in the head of one person. But the jury had to not just hear a confession, but to assess the weight of the entire evidence base. The prosecution built its case around 3 key elements: Jayme Closs's testimony, the evidence collected in the suspect's home, and Patterson's own confession. Each of these links reinforced the others. Jaime's personal belongings, traces of her presence, and even notes confirming the planning of the crime were found in the defendant's home. Forensic experts presented their results. Ballistics matched the weapon found on Patterson, and DNA traces matched Jaime. The police officers involved in the investigation also testified at the hearing. They reconstructed the chronology step by step, from the 9/11 call to the moment of arrest. Their testimony made a strong impression on those present. Every detail emphasized the cold-bloodedness of the criminal's actions and the desperate situation of the victim. Jayme's testimony was given special attention. The court took into account her young age and the trauma she had experienced, so the interrogation was conducted in a gentle mode, with the participation of psychologists. She said that she was kept in isolation, under constant control, deprived of her freedom. These words confirmed the seriousness of the charges of kidnapping and false imprisonment. Despite the emotional complexity, her testimony became the central moment of the trial. Defense lawyers tried to mitigate the responsibility of the client, pointing to his age, lack of a criminal record, and possible psychological problems. They petitioned for a psychiatric examination. Experts did indeed find signs of isolation and social isolation in Patterson, but came to the conclusion that he was fully aware of the nature of his actions and understood the consequences. This meant that he bears full criminal responsibility. During the hearings, public interest did not wane. Each hearing was broadcast on the news, discussed on social networks. In Barron and neighboring counties, there were rallies in support of the Closs family. People brought signs with the words, "Justice for Jayme," and "Forever in our hearts, James and Denise." The public pressure made the trial not only a legal event, but also a moral one for the entire region. As the trial approached the sentencing stage, the court had to consider a guilty plea. Patterson unexpectedly abandoned the lengthy trial and declared that he was ready to plead guilty to the main charges. Prosecutors took this as a way to avoid additional publicity, but at the same time insisted that the plea should not affect the severity of the sentence. The judge heard all sides. Prosecutors insisted on life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, emphasizing the particular brutality of the crime, its premeditation, and the consequences for the only survivor, Jayme. Defense attorneys asked to take into account the defendant's young age, the possibility of rehabilitation, and a guilty plea. But these arguments seemed weak against the backdrop of the gravity of the crime. The courtroom was silent as the judge began to read the verdict. The atmosphere was tense, with reporters keeping their cameras trained on the defendant and the victim's family. The judge listed each count of the indictment, supported by the evidence. Then came the words many had been waiting for. Jake Patterson pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and kidnapping. The sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole. The reaction in the courtroom was unanimous. Many breathed a sigh of relief. For the Closs family, the verdict was a long-awaited conclusion to a painful trial. For society, it was confirmation that justice had been done. Patterson himself remained motionless, his face expressionless. The trial was over, but the Closs case would forever remain etched in the memories of Barron and all of America.